biomarkers that you should be looking at. And it looks like we're live. All right, so we're going to talk about inflammation because this is really common for a lot of folks. And I want to share with you a little bit more about a new composite immunologic marker known as GlycA. Here's what it is. We'll talk a little bit more about it. I think you'll find this incredibly fascinating because this biomarker was elucidated in the medical literature back in 2015, but it's surprising how infrequently it is run. We hear a lot about C-reactive protein. We hear a lot about interleukins, interleukin 6, interleukin 1 beta, things like that. But this relatively newish biomarker called GlycA, which looks and assesses via NMR the overall inflammatory index within your immune system. And it looks specifically at glycosylation and acetylation on immunoglobulins, which are known to be increased in contexts of inflammation. So I think this is just important to discuss. I want to thank you all for being here. It's been a long time since we've done Metabolic Monday. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button. If you get some value, please just leave some love there because we want to let people know that we're back doing these Metabolic Mondays live and talking about all things nutrition, metabolic health, blood testing, and beyond. So let's get into the meat of this. GlycA. What is this? Why should you care? Here's what it is. I mean, this is a very, I think, important tool that we have access to. Now, GlycA is tested via what's known as NMR. As many of you know, if you've gotten an advanced lipoprotein particle test, you look at the one tool, nuclear magnetic resonance, can look at the different species of lipids that you have, and that's the same analytical technology that GlycA is leveraging or using. And what's neat about this is this has been shown to be elevated in the context of high-risk cardiovascular disease because many people want to know, your lipids are high, you have high LDL cholesterol, maybe your C-reactive protein is 0.8 or some such thing, or your total cholesterol is over 200 milligrams per deciliter and your doctor's freaking out. And you're like, what do I really, think about this? Well, it turns out that GlycA, if elevated in context with elevated C-reactive protein, that would suggest a significant increased risk for cardiovascular disease. So I think we should be talking about this, especially for those of you that are lean mass hyper responders, which is a lot of you based upon the comments that I have read over the years. So GlycA is a composite inflammatory tool that we can utilize in the context of C-reactive protein. So many of you have looked at or heard about C-reactive protein. Now, this is a very non-specific assessment of your overall level of inflammation. And we don't really know where it's coming from. Was it a common cold? Did you recently get exposed to COVID? Do you have smoldering low-grade inflammation from obesity and elevated belly fat? Or is it something more insidious? Now, this is where GlycA comes in because if we pair C-reactive protein with GlycA, we get a really nice composite score of overall chronic disease risk. And so that's what I wanted to sort of talk with you all about today and get into the weeds of this a little bit more. Shall we? Let's dive into some papers that you should probably put on your radar here. So here we go. This is one article of several that we're going to talk about today in the context of inflammation and GlycA. We got to wait for this request. And of course, I can send you, I'll put a blog together with some of these articles here. So this was published, this was one of the first recent articles about GlycA. GlycA measured by NMR spectroscopy is associated with disease activity and cardiovascular risk disease in chronic inflammatory diseases. So as you saw from that wonderful graphic, we have rheumatoid arthritis, we have psoriasis, we have other diabetic related complications, other inflammatory conditions. Now, the composite of looking at GlycA in the context of C-reactive protein is what I think is very interesting. So the investigators say, traditional assessments of cardiovascular disease risk, including lipid panel assessment, Framingham risk score, and HSCRP, do not effectively capture the highest risk of cardiovascular disease in chronic inflammatory diseases. Predictions of the cardiovascular disease risk in these diseases may be improved with measurements of GlycA, a composite measure of concentrations and glycosylations of acute phase proteins. In chronic inflammatory diseases, GlycA concentrations are associated with both traditional cardiovascular risk factors as well as disease activity. They go on to say that GlycA concentrations respond to non-pharmacologic interventions targeting cardiovascular risk, such as exercise, such as weight loss, as well as pharmacologic agents that can reduce inflammation. Okay, so this is, of course, very obvious to many of you that if we are to fully address the cardiovascular risk and inflammatory risk in patients, we, of course, in yourselves, we should, of course, consider diet and lifestyle. So here's just something that I want to share with you. And this is some laboratory assessments from an individual that I'm working with. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so what we have here is, as you can see, looking on the screen here, you have the C-reactive protein of 3, okay? This is the upper tolerable limit. You know, after 3, if CRP is consistently elevated, we start to wonder what is going on. Where is this chronic inflammation coming from? So what I also wanted to look at is his GlycA, and it's close to 400. So this is something you may want to write down. If your GlycA is over or close to 400 and your C-reactive protein is over 3, that is a problem. So that's one thing that I do want to have you all sort of better understand is this, looking at these two together, the C-reactive protein and the GlycA together, give you a really good idea of overall inflammation and cardiovascular risk. So I think that's important for us to better understand and give us a good idea about why we should be looking at this. When your C-reactive protein is elevated, you want to be looking at GlycA because it's going to give you a better insight and understanding about what is really going on with regards to the source of the inflammation. Now, in the context of this particular individual, as you can see here, their ferritin is quite high at 726 nanograms per ml. You know, for most of you, especially you women watching, your ferritin is probably 50 or 75 nanograms per ml. This individual's is quite elevated. And we now know this to be a metabolic hyperferritinemia, which is quite rare, but something that we really should consider because, of course, it's linked with eye issues, vision loss, liver congestion, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis or NASH, and things like that. So that's really something that we should be looking at. But GlycA was helpful for me to better understand, you know, was this an undiagnosed hemochromatosis, or is this something else going on? So looking at the GlycA, we can see in the context of C-reactive protein that there is some systemic inflammation occurring. So again, folks, if you're enjoying the content, hit that like button. I really appreciate you all being here. I know it's been a long time since we've done a Metabolic Monday, but I'm grateful that you're here live with Anthony in the house from Ohio. I have 80s nostalgia guy. Thank you for being here. We have Get Fit. Get Fit says, hey, Mike, do you have any information on very low white blood cell counts on a keto carnivore diet since 2018? And levels have gradually gone down below normal. All other biomarkers are in normal ranges. You know, Get Fit, this is not too uncommon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop out the chat here. I don't know exactly what to say with regards to a chronically low white blood cell count, although I do see this. I actually just was working with a client last Saturday who had this very issue, and my advice to them was just to follow it over time. Kimberly, I'm going to get to your question momentarily. Again, really appreciate your comments. Guys, any questions you have is fair game. It doesn't have to be related to GlycA. I'm really excited about pairing C-reactive protein with GlycA, and we're updating our blood work cheat sheet to reflect that. So that is where we are here. Let's see here. What do we do about a chronically low white blood cell count? In my opinion, we just need to follow this and look at this and just see, what could be going on here. And also look at other things like platelets, like red blood cell counts, look at the neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio. We want to just be looking at things. And of course, this GlycA biomarker, I think, would be helpful to at least be rest assured that the cause of your low white blood cell counts are not chronic smoldering inflammation. So I think that could be something to consider there. But Get Fit, I would just say watch it. That's what I would say. There is what's called a LPI, a lymphocyte proliferation index that you can do through a lab called SpectraCell. And what I like about this test, and I know it's a little bit expensive, and SpectraCell, of course, offers their micronutrient profile to see what different micronutrients or micronutrient deficiencies can cause growth abnormalities or proliferation abnormalities within your white blood cells. And so this LPI index is a great way to triangulate or ascertain if one has a immunosenescence going on within their immune system, if their immune system is functionally exhausted. So Get Fit, this could just be your normal baseline. Perhaps your white blood cell counts were higher before and now they're lower. So that's what I would say. Kimberly says, where can I get this GlycA test that we've been talking about? So for those of you just now tuning in, we're talking about this new composite inflammatory biomarker known as GlycA. When I say new, it's not really new. It's been known for about 10 years, but practitioners are just now starting to incorporate this into clinical practice. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the GlycA image there so that you all can see this. You can write this down. Next time you get your annual physical, you go to your doctor, you want to see, hey, what's going on with my health? You want to look at C-reactive protein and GlycA together. That's the whole point that we want to look at. And as I just mentioned, I'm working with an individual who, has a ferritin issue. As you can see here, the serum ferritin in this case is abnormally high. And as best we know, we don't suspect hemochromatosis. We suspect this more rare increase in ferritin known as metabolic hyperferritinemia. And so that is something that we are actively addressing in this context, but it was helpful to have the CRP and the GlycA together to help us better understand what is the source of this elevated ferritin. Is it more inflammatory mediated? And it appears, at least at this point in time, that that is the case. Okay, we have more questions coming in. Guys and gals, is this helpful? If it is, hit that like button, please. That'll tell the algorithm that this content is helpful for people that are just scrolling through Instagram or YouTube videos and so forth. Okay. Kimberly says, why would we have this blood test done? Well, Kimberly, this is a great question, by the way. Thank you for this question. Why do we care about any blood test? Well, we want to just check in and we want to look at just not one snapshot in time, Kimberly, but how are Kimberly's labs changing as you get older? Because as you get older, two things invariably happen. Inflammation increases with age. This is a phenomenon known as inflammaging. As you get older, your baseline level of inflammation will increase. So you want to track that. You want to see what is going on there. Number two, as you get older, Kimberly, and everyone else listening, your blood sugar handling capabilities get less and less insulin sensitive. You get more and more insulin resistant over time. So we want to see just how much do we need to tweak our diet and our lifestyle, our sleep, our stress reduction tactics or strategies, our circadian rhythm optimization, and beyond. So that's where we are going, and that's why we care. That's helpful. Let me know. Okay, Chad says, why do I get migraines and disassociation with any magnesium that I take? Whoa. Chad, this is a really good question. I don't have the answer to this. I really don't. Have you tried magnesium L-threonate? Have you tried the ATA mag, the magnesium acetyltaurinate? I would be very interested in knowing that, Chad. I wonder if it's very curious. I'm not sure. But I would also look at who you're getting your magnesium from. So that's something that I would consider. You can send me an email, mike@highintensityhealth.com, Chad. Send me an email. I'll try to help you out. Okay, Elaine says, how can I bring down a high fibrinogen level? Yeah, this is a good question. Well, of course, we want to figure out why is the fibrinogen elevated? Is there any sedentary activity, lack of exercise, obesity, chronic inflammation that would be increasing fibrinogen? Now, just Elaine, if you're listening, we've been talking about ferritin. I just want to make sure that you're specifically talking about fibrinogen. The way that we would bring that down would be, and the way that we would effectively help the body prevent any complications from a high fibrinogen, which of course would increase risk for clotting and associated issues, would be regular movement, exercise in the post-meal window in particular, or during, long periods of sitting. If you work at a desk job, Elaine or Kimberly, if you're traveling, you want to get up and move your body a lot, that would be helpful. Going in the sauna, cold plunge, all of that would be really helpful. So there's fibrinogen is going to be more of a lifestyle induced change there. Obviously improving blood sugar regulation and tolerance, that's going to be helpful as well. Okay. Ernest says, the only blood work you need in 2025 is atoning blood of Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for our sins. He's at the door. Yes, faith and spirituality is very important, Ernest. I cannot argue with that. You are 100% correct in your statement. However, I think it's ignorant to also not recognize that we should be looking at objective biomarkers to see where our health trends are going. That's my suggestion. Okay, Rebecca says, hello from Jacksonville, Florida. I used functional health blood work for the first time. Love it. My C-reactive protein was great. So it sounds like I don't need this GlycA. Yeah, Rebecca, if your C-reactive protein is 0.8, forget about it. You're probably just fine. But if your CRP was over 2 nanograms per ml, I believe is is it nanograms per ml? Yeah, milligrams per liter. Then we might want to also look at that GlycA next time. So that's a good thing. So you don't want to be getting donating blood all the time. I mean, some people love to be a pincushion. I don't really like venipuncture. Okay, Chad is back with his comment on magnesium L-threonate. Interesting. We'll get to that in a moment. Kirk says, I would say if magnesium causes headaches, you're probably dehydrated. Yeah, that could be part of it. But Chad goes on to say that L-threonate was the worst contributor to migraine and dissociation, and I get all of my supplements from Metagenics. I am neurodivergent, and I'm not sure if my system is just overly interoceptive. That could be it, Chad. I would look at magnesium, the ATA mag. It's magnesium acetyl taurinate to see if there's similar issues. So let me know on that. Christopher says, I was dealing with overbearing tiredness. A blood test showed low vitamin B levels, fine testosterone, but high estrogen. Next week, I will be testing for Lyme disease. Okay. Christopher, did you mean low vitamin D or low vitamin B? Because serum vitamin B, folate, B12, methylmalonic acid, things like that, those are okay, but they do fluctuate. So I wasn't sure if you're mentioning or you intended to write vitamin D or vitamin B, but let me know. Okay, Elaine says, yes, I am relatively sedentary because I have cerebral palsy and I work a desk job. Thank you for your recommendations. I will try to increase movement and see how that helps move the needle. Yeah, so Elaine, minimum of 10,000 steps per day. Not necessarily all at once. You can do exercise snacks, 2,000 steps in the morning, 2,000 steps after lunch, 3,000 to 4,000 steps after dinner. That'd be a great thing to consider. Arcadepiano, I quit taking blood tests in 2012 or so. They called me superhuman. Never seen better blood ever. They repeated this incredible test. I'm not going to lose any other than wounds and mosquitoes. Okay. I understand that you don't want to do labs, and that's totally up to you. Some people don't want to check their bank account. They just want to have faith that there's going to be enough funds in there. I get it. It's all good. But me personally, I care about my health. I have a child, I want to be around. I just want to make sure that if something starts to trend in the wrong direction, that I'm out front of it. So that's my recommendation. Oh, Christopher was extremely high in vitamin D. Interesting. Now, Christopher, do you take vitamin D? Some people do speculate that a very high vitamin D level might be related to, and we're talking about the 125 dihydroxy vitamin D. So yeah, that would be helpful. JDW says, any recommendation on home labs? Well, you can download our blood work cheat sheet that I linked in the description below, and you can just go to LabCorp. LabCorp allows you to order on their website now as a patient. So it's become very democratized, the access to labs. Okay, folks, was this helpful? Let me know. Hit that like button. Show some love in the chat if this content is helpful. that, of course, goes a long way, just so I know that we should continue to do these videos. Christopher says, I was told that a high vitamin D level could have bumped my estrogen even higher. Christopher, I'm not really sure if the vitamin D would have a significant shift on your estrogen or testosterone. Maybe, but not really. The estrogen could be related to visceral adipose tissue. It could be related to persistent organic pollutants. Richard says, hey, Mike, have you heard of the MVX test? Yes. Richard, appreciate you being here. It turns out that one of the things that we've been talking about in today's show, it actually is looking at the MVX test right here. So this is the MVX Plus by LabCorp. And that's why I look at GlycA on clients. And so Darren Schmidt has turned me on to this, and it's been a very interesting phenomenon. So I do quite like looking at MVX in combination with other biomarkers. So yeah, that is something that I do consider. So that's part of our blood work cheat sheet that you can, of course, download for free in the link in the description below. Desai says, you might watch out when taking statins. Took statins and white blood cells were low. After stopping the statin, the white blood cells improved. Interesting. I wasn't aware that there was a connection between white blood cell counts and statins. Folks, just a quick plug for Myoscience. For those of you all that are here, creatine is super popular right now. Majority of the creatine that most people buy, including yourself, maybe, is sourced in China. The raw materials are synthesized in China, and they can have impurities that are harmful for your health. The least of which is atrazine and mercury and arsenic and things like that. Other impurities are known as dicyandiamide and dihydroatrazine, actually, and this is harmful for your health. And so that's why I recommend sourcing creatine from Germany. And Myoscience uses exclusively creatine that has been manufactured and is the purest creatine in the world, sourced in Germany. So you can save using the link in the description below and use the code podcast at checkout. We have a bunch of videos coming out all about creatine to help you better understand the sourcing of creatine and the like. So there is that. So friends, in conclusion, when we do our lab work, when you go to your doctor, you get your annual physical, you want to, of course, look at C-reactive protein. And if that is elevated, you want to look at GlycA, or you can just add it on. It's only $50 as a composite panel with the MVX panel, as we've been talking about. And GlycA will give you a better understanding of the severity of your chronic inflammation and now how that could be increasing your risk for other diseases like autoimmunity, like cardiovascular disease and beyond. So it's really simple. This biomarker has been around. It's a little bit more stable and reflective of chronic inflammation than is just C-reactive protein. So please put this on your radar. Help your doctor, help your primary healthcare practitioner start to get this out there. We need this information to be out there. It's not expensive. It's not boutique. It's not esoteric. It's something out there. Anthony has a good question. He says, does your creatine show to perform better than others? Well, it's 99% purified. Okay, so the raw material made in Germany, we're talking about creatine now. Anthony had a question. The reason why I'm really helping you better understand the qualitative differences between creatine sourcing is majority of the creatine I found out after starting a manufacturing facility is sourced in China. And this stuff has impurities, arsenic, heavy metals, residual solvents. It turns out that creatine sourcing actually starts from calcium carbide as a byproduct of lime extraction and the burning of coal. And that's mixed with an amino acid known as sarcosine. And ultimately, you eventually get creatine. But sometimes the Chinese have been known to use solvents and they're higher. That raw material is higher in impurities. It's only an 84% raw material. In contrast, the German material is 99% purified. This stuff is very clean, very pure. We've done a bunch of videos on this, but there's two impurities that you really want to watch out for, and that's dicyandiamide and dihydroatrazine. And this is really, these are not good to be ingesting, especially because a lot of people are taking creatine in really high dosages. So it comes down to a purity. If you want to get creatine that's synthesized in China and you don't really know what the impurities are in there and you just want to do it because it's like super cheap at Costco, fine. But you get what you pay for. And if you're taking 5, 10, 15, 20 grams a day, you're taking higher dosages, I would just suggest sourcing it from a company that's supplying you raw material made, the purest material in the world, from Germans in Germany. So that's what we do over at Myoscience. So that's that. But Anthony, great question. Is there any randomized placebo-controlled head-to-head studies looking at, European source creatine versus Chinese source creatine? No, we don't have that, of course. But I will tell you, there's lots of reviews from our customers and they report really good feedback with our formulation. So there's that. Kirk says, I have 2 55-year-old male friends with type 2 diabetes that resulted in kidney failure. Oh man, Kirk, that sucks. Both had to start dialysis at 55. That is incredibly sad. What are the blood tests for kidney health? Yeah, you want to look at the albumin to creatinine ratio in the urine. That would be a good one to look at. To see how bad are the kidneys, but if they need dialysis, they're pretty bad, obviously. So Kirk, I would do the best you could to get your friends to start exercising more, doing a low carb diet, things like that. That would be super helpful. Nadja Wolf says, I want to start supplementing with vitamin D, but I want to start getting blood work. If I have your cheat sheet, how do I know how much it would cost? Can I possibly use my HSA? Yeah. These are all good questions, Nadja Wolf. Go to your doctor, I would say. That I would take the cheat sheet, go to your doctor, I would say. So yeah, that's a good one. Anthony says, I'm definitely going to try yours. I'm about out of my big box brand. Yeah. So Anthony, again, when it comes to creatine, you have micronized and unmicronized, so this is the unmicronized. I would suggest starting there. It's affordable. It's like $25, 60 servings. It's amazing. If you want 75 servings, we do have a micronized version, but most people do just well with the unmicronized version. Minerila says, do you recommend Pectosol for inflammation reduction or CFS? Okay, what supplements would you recommend for adrenal fatigue and things like this? Sunlight. I know it sounds stupid, but I would make sure that you're getting morning sunlight and you're getting really dim light exposure in the evening time. I would recommend DHEA for sure. And I would take adrenal glandular, Marinella. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that. Marinella. That's what I would suggest. Of course, there's a litany of other issues. Slowly introducing exercise and things like that would be helpful. But morning sunlight is going to be your best friend in reducing stress. Would be helpful. Blood sugar regulation, of course. Good sleep. Just taking a weekend and literally catching up on sleep. That would be helpful. Louis says, my fasting insulin has remained low 2s, but my triglycerides and total cholesterol has skyrocketed. HDL has dropped a bit too. I was told that maybe insulin is suppressed. Time to bring carbs while exercising. Yeah, Louis, I'm worried about the high triglycerides. You could, have more intra-workout carbs. So that would be interesting. So that's something that I would consider. But if the triglycerides are going up, I think you got to exercise more. That's what I would suggest, is do more high intensity interval training, do more resistance training and things like that. That's what I would suggest. So yeah, great questions coming in, folks. Get Fit says, okay, when I take creatine, it bumps my creatinine to bun ratio. Yeah, well, Get Fit, you're probably sourcing creatine from China. Creatine from China is known to have higher levels of creatinine in it. So that's problematic. And so that's why, again, this is yet another reason to take creatine that the raw material has been made in Germany. That could be part of the issue. I've seen that in some clients, actually. Okay. Awesome questions. Kirk, hopefully that was helpful. Let's see. I really appreciate you all being here. Was it helpful? Let me know by hitting that like button. Any questions, comments? We'll be talking a lot more about GlycA in the future and the combination of GlycA with C-reactive protein. But again, take a screenshot, talk to your primary healthcare practitioner about using this in conjunction with C-reactive protein next time you run your labs. And I'm grateful that you tuned in. We'll catch you next week. Have an awesome evening and good start to your day. Anthony says his serum creatinine increases as well. Well, Anthony, I think you just admitted that you're taking creatine from a big box. I would love to know if taking the Myoscience creatine that is made from European sources, how that affects your serum creatinine. Let me know. I appreciate you all being here and have an awesome evening. Bye now.